Imagine a world holding its breath. Picture millions of people, from bustling cities to quiet rural towns, all united by a single overwhelming fear. The air is thick with anxiety, every conversation tinged with uncertainty. Radios crackle with urgent news bulletins, and families gather around, searching for hope in the voices of distant leaders. The threat is invisible, but it feels closer than ever before. The year is 1962. The world is caught in a moment of extraordinary tension. Headlines scream of crisis, and the ordinary rhythms of life are interrupted by the possibility of catastrophe. In classrooms, children rehearse emergency drills, while adults scan the horizon for signs of danger. In Cuba, missiles stand ready. Hidden among the palm trees and sugarcane fields, these weapons are poised to strike at a moment's notice. The world's superpowers are locked in a deadly game of chess, each move watched with bated breath. These are not just any missiles. They are Soviet weapons, powerful enough to destroy entire cities in minutes. Their presence in Cuba, just 90 miles from American shores, transforms the Caribbean into the most dangerous place on Earth. The world's fate seems to rest on a knife's edge. The United States watches, fear gripping the nation. In living rooms across the country, families whisper about fallout shelters and ration supplies. The sense of vulnerability is overwhelming, as if the world could change forever in a single instant. This was the Cuban Missile Crisis, the closest humanity has ever come to nuclear war. For 13 days, leaders on both sides weighed impossible choices, knowing that a single misstep could unleash unimaginable destruction. For 13 days, the fate of the world hung in the balance. Every hour brought new dangers, and every decision could mean the difference between peace and annihilation. The world watched, waited, and hoped for a miracle. This crisis was a defining moment of the Cold War, a period of tension and rivalry that shaped the 20th century, and honestly continues to echo in the 21st. The world was divided not just by ideology, but by a constant, simmering fear of conflict on a global scale. This video will explore the Cold War, from its origins to its lasting impact. We'll look at the leaders, the ordinary people, and the moments that defined an era. We'll see how the world was shaped by suspicion, competition, and the ever-present threat of nuclear war. We will journey through its key events, understand its causes and consequences, and examine how its legacy shapes our world today. The story of the Cold War is not just history, it's a warning, a lesson, and a reminder of how close we came to the edge and how important it is to remember. The Cold War was not a war in the traditional sense. There were no massive battles between armies clashing on a battlefield. Instead, it was a global standoff between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. These nations emerged from World War II as victors, yet deeply suspicious of each other. The US, a capitalist democracy, championed individual freedom and a free market economy. The Soviet Union, a communist state, promoted a centrally controlled economy and the idea of a classless society. These fundamentally different ideologies created a deep divide, splitting the world into two opposing camps. In 1946, Winston Churchill, the wartime Prime Minister of Britain, delivered a powerful speech. He spoke of an iron curtain descending across Europe, dividing East from West. This iron curtain was not a physical barrier, but a political and ideological one. It represented the Soviet Union's growing influence and control over Eastern Europe. In response to the Soviet threat, U.S. President Harry Truman announced the Truman Doctrine in 1947. This policy pledged American support to any nation resisting communist expansion. The stage was set for a global struggle between two opposing systems. The Cold War had begun. Korea, a nation on the eastern edge of Asia, became a flashpoint in the Cold War. Once a unified kingdom with a rich and ancient history, Korea found itself at the center of global tensions as the world's superpowers vied for influence in the aftermath of World War II. The fate of this peninsula would soon become a symbol of the ideological struggle between communism and democracy, and the lives of millions would be forever changed. After World War II, Korea, previously under Japanese rule for decades, was divided along the 38th parallel. This arbitrary line, drawn by foreign powers with little regard for the people living there, split families, communities, and a nation that had long been united. The North was occupied by Soviet forces, while the South came under American control, setting the stage for a tense and uneasy peace. the Soviet Union quickly established a communist government in the north, led by Kim Il-sung, while the United States supported a non-communist regime in the south, headed by Syngman Rhee. Both sides claimed to be the legitimate government of all Korea, and both were determined to reunify the country on their own terms. The peninsula became a microcosm of the broader Cold War rivalry, with each superpower pouring resources and advisors into their respective zones. In June 1950, tensions erupted into open conflict when North Korean troops, heavily armed and supported by the Soviets, crossed the 38th parallel and launched a surprise invasion of South Korea. The attack was swift and devastating, catching the South Korean forces and their American allies off guard. Cities fell, and refugees flooded the roads as the front lines shifted rapidly. This act ignited the Korean War, a brutal conflict that would last 3 years and devastate the peninsula. The fighting was fierce and unrelenting, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. Towns and villages were destroyed, and the civilian population endured unimaginable hardship as the war raged back and forth across the land. The United States, leading a United Nations coalition, intervened on behalf of South Korea, determined to stop the spread of communism in Asia. In response, China entered the war to support the North, sending hundreds of thousands of troops across the border. The conflict quickly escalated into a bloody stalemate, with neither side able to secure a decisive victory. The war ended in a stalemate in 1953, with an armistice that left the country still divided along a heavily fortified border. The Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ, became one of the most tense and dangerous frontiers in the world. Families remained separated, and the wounds of war continued to shape the lives of Koreans on both sides of the divide. The Korean War demonstrated the global reach of the Cold War and its potential for turning hot. It was a stark warning to the world of how quickly ideological rivalries could erupt into devastating conflict, drawing in nations from around the globe and leaving a legacy that would echo for generations. In October of 1962, the world found itself teetering on the edge of catastrophe. The United States and the Soviet Union, the two superpowers of the era, were locked in a tense standoff that threatened to erupt into full-scale nuclear war. For nearly 2 weeks, people everywhere watched in horror and disbelief as the fate of humanity seemed to hang in the balance. News reports dominated the airwaves, and families gathered around radios and televisions, anxiously awaiting updates that could change the course of history in an instant. The crisis began when American U-2 spy planes captured photographic evidence of Soviet ballistic missiles being installed in Cuba, just 90 miles from the coast of Florida. The discovery sent shockwaves through the U.S. government and the public alike. The presence of these missiles meant that major American cities, including Washington, D.C. and New York, were suddenly within striking distance of nuclear attack. The stakes had never been higher, and the world braced itself for what might come next. The threat was immediate and terrifying. Civil defense drills became a daily reality, with schoolchildren practicing duck-and-cover exercises and families building fallout shelters in their backyards. Across the nation, anxiety and fear gripped the population as the possibility of nuclear war became all too real. The world had never been so close to the brink of destruction. For 13 agonizing days, President John F. Kennedy and his closest advisors met in secret, weighing their options and debating how to respond. On the other side of the world, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev faced his own pressures and uncertainties. The two leaders exchanged urgent messages, each trying to avoid a catastrophic miscalculation. The world held its breath as the superpowers navigated a diplomatic minefield, knowing that a single wrong move could trigger a nuclear exchange. After days of intense negotiations, a breakthrough was finally achieved. Behind closed doors, diplomats worked tirelessly to craft a solution that would allow both sides to step back from the abyss without losing face. The agreement was delicate, but it offered hope that peace could prevail. The Soviets agreed to withdraw their missiles from Cuba under the watchful eyes of international observers. In a secret arrangement, the United States also pledged to remove its Jupiter missiles from Turkey, which had been aimed at the Soviet Union. Both sides made concessions, and the world breathed a collective sigh of relief as the immediate threat of nuclear war receded. The Cuban Missile Crisis remains one of the most dramatic and dangerous moments in modern history, a chilling reminder of how close humanity came to self-destruction. It underscored the devastating consequences of nuclear weapons and the importance of diplomacy, communication, and restraint in a world where the stakes could not be higher. The Vietnam War was another proxy war of the Cold War. Vietnam, like Korea, was divided, a communist North and a US-backed South. The US, fearing the spread of communism throughout Southeast Asia, became deeply involved in the conflict. The Vietnam War was long and brutal. It deeply divided American society, sparking widespread protests and anti-war sentiment. The war had a profound impact on Vietnam as well, devastating the country and leaving a legacy of pain and division. The U.S. withdrawal in 1973 marked a turning point in the Cold War, raising questions about American power and the domino theory. In 1989, the Berlin Wall, a powerful symbol of the Cold War division of Europe, crumbled. For decades, this concrete barrier had separated East and West Berlin, representing the stark ideological divide between communism and democracy. The fall of the Berlin Wall was a pivotal moment in the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe. It was followed by the reunification of Germany in 1990 and the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991. The Cold War, which had defined global politics for nearly half a century, was finally over. Although the Cold War is over, its legacy continues to shape the world today. The rivalry between Russia, the successor state to the Soviet Union, and the West persists, as seen in the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. The rise of China as a global power has also drawn comparisons to the Cold War rivalry, with concerns about economic competition and ideological clashes. Furthermore, the battleground has shifted from physical spaces to the digital realm. Cyber warfare, disinformation campaigns, and technological competition have become the new frontiers of global rivalry. The Cold War may be over, but the struggle for power and influence continues. The Cold War serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of ideological division, unchecked rivalry, and the terrifying potential of nuclear weapons. It highlights the importance of diplomacy, communication, and finding common ground to prevent conflict. As we navigate the complexities of the 21st century, the lessons of the Cold War remain relevant. By understanding the mistakes of the past, we can strive to build a future where dialogue trumps division and cooperation replaces confrontation. The Cold War may be over, but the pursuit of peace remains our greatest challenge and our most important responsibility.